buttons for different things. So. Ladies and gentlemen, back with the Louis B. Free Radio Show, Brain Food from the Heartland. I am thrilled. Yeah, this is going to be so unprofessional. What I'm going to do. Do you have the book close to you?
Yeah.
Dogwinks. I'm going to take a picture from the screen. How about this for raw, unedited, and lacking in professionalism? Can you hold it next to you? Next to you. Can you back? Can you get
next to me?
There you go.
Yeah,
there we go.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you. How about that for unprofessional? You do a
I
radio
think
show, you're
it's
doing
in the moment.
Video.
I love it.
Thank you. I am so delighted and honored to have you both, Louise DuArt and Ira Rushnell, back on the Louis B. Free Radio Show, Brain Food from the Heartland. Thank you both.
Oh, it's so great to be back.
Always glad to be with you, Louis.
I just you two are just amazing, and I want to give just a little bit of the backstory as to why we're doing today and how it all came together. So last week I had a lady from the community in. She brought her bulldog in, and as you see, and most of my audience knows, listeners have seen pictures. It's chaos. The executive director, CEO of the library system in the area, calls me the king of chaos. I've had all kinds of things about it's chaos. When people say organized chaos, I said it's just chaos. They're not organized. And I have books that are ready as to donate to the library, to donate to the Friends of the Library gift store, etc. Yet there was another book that was down there that isn't in the donation area, Dogwinks. And this little bulldog chose Dogwinks to, chew on.
I love it.
And there was one picture, and SQuire, I don't know if I sent you the one where it looks like he's reading. He's got the book open, and he's looking up at me. He's got his paw on the page.
Yeah.
So I got very excited and right away sent some of the pictures to you. Then I started to think about it, and I thought, what if he's like not offended, but what not happy that I let the dog chew the book up and taking pictures of the dog chewing your book.
What if he's one of those literary people and he doesn't like that?
Yeah.
Of his book.
Well, I didn't mean it. I just thought, it was one of those after the facts thinking, maybe that wasn't such a good idea after all. Maybe I should have just reached out and say, let's talk about the Netflix movie, and maybe not. And you were so wonderful how you responded, of course. And when I retrospectively, when I said to my wife, I said, oh, I don't know, I'm kind of freaked out. So of course he's going to be okay. It's SQuire Rushnell. He's going to be okay with it.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And
well, let me tell you what my reaction, in the moment, I seized it as an opportunity.
Yeah.
Because we have a series that we have right now being considered by one of the other networks that we're not working with, not Hallmark, not Netflix, but it's another big network. And it's called Bite-Sized Godwink Stories. Now, the picture of a dog gnarling away at the corner of our book under the headline, Bite-Sized Godwink Stories, I think is going to be a beautiful poster.
I do too. And if you did bite-sized dogwink stories,
bite-sized
even better.
Dogwink Stories,
Yeah, so
absolutely.
It's meant to be.
So I need
seen the picture.
There you go.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
I need to get the consent of
the
that
bulldog.
dog. Do I
The
have
dog?
that
I was going to
dog's
say,
consent for
Yeah.
is using his picture?
Oh, that's
I will
cute.
check with Walter's mom about that.
Dude, oh my
That's
gosh.
great. I'm touched by that. That's great. That would be great. But it's just it was and then I reached out and here you are. So
Yeah.
Oh,
you're
yeah.
both gracious
All
enough
right. We
to
look
come
for
back.
any opportunity
That's
to
right.
chat with you, Louis.
That's right.
Thank
To
you.
brag about our movie.
Yes, of course.
Oh,
Yeah.
the movie. And I want to talk about, but again, I know all my listeners know who you are, but Louise, a little bit about yourself, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Well, actually, there's a wonderful Godwink story about how SQuire and I got together because he gave me my first job in television over 40 years ago.
Mhm.
And then, so I got to meet him then. Of course, we didn't get married until years later, but I ended up doing a show on ABC for SQuire. And then from there, I started getting other shows. And so I've been in the business many, many years. And the last thing I did on stage was I worked with the wonderful Tim Conway and Harvey Korman. And it was almost 15 years that we did a show called Together Again, where we reenacted some of the great sketches from the Carol Burnett shows. I was more or less the cheap version of Carol Burnett. And we just had a ball. And when Harvey died, which was just so tragic for all of us, Tim and I decided we would just the two of us go out, and we did it for another few years, just the two of us. And then when Tim passed away, I turned to SQuire and I said, my career's over. No more. I'm not going to, once you've worked with the best, truly, once you've worked with the best, it's like, what do you do after that?
Well, you go to work with your husband.
That's right.
And you co-authored 6 books.
Yes.
And you're my co-executive producer
Yes.
on movies.
But we were
And that's
always
what you
doing
do.
books I was doing television as we were doing the live shows and everything. But truly, people say, do you ever go on stage anymore and do some of your impressions? And I have to be honest with you, it's like there's a part of you inside that knows when to hold them, know when to fold them. And I just knew, I just said, it's just time. I just like poke me with a fork. I'm done with that part of my life. But I love what we do now, which I find so creative to be able to write books and then to do movies.
Yeah, which is incredible. And I want to talk about that. Will you do a quick one for us? Louise, a quick.
Well, I always miss Joe Rivers. Yeah, she's Louis, she's one of my favorites. She's terrific, terrific, terrific. And Judge Judy, do you say stupid on my forehead here, sir?
Of course, George Burns. We love George Burns.
I was wondering who I was going to wake up next to this morning. I had no idea, just like any other day.
That's beautiful. I love that. It's funny, hearing the voices, but watching you, watching you, it just doesn't, it's almost like a disconnect. It's almost like my brain can't figure that out. That's amazing.
I know.
Amazing.
Well, it's it is funny because when Louise is any one of those characters, she looks like him. And I would watch her. I would be backstage and I'd watch her go on stage as Cher, and I would say even her ankles are Cher. Not that I know what Cher's ankles look like, but she just looks like that ought to be Cher's ankles. Or George Burns, a 100-year-old guy.
Yeah, I was going to say the George Burns. Not the. That's absolutely fantastic. I want to get into the movie. I want to get into more in Dogwinks, but take me back, because I think the first time you were on with me was when Godwinks came out with a 20
years ago.
Yeah.
20
years ago.
Wow.
Yep.
That's how it
was just, I'll tell you when it was. It was just before
9/11.
9/11.
It was.
And our 20th anniversary of 9/11 was last year? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So
it was at a time when the culture needed that hope, that handrail to hold on to. And it was, of course, we didn't know at the time, what SQuire didn't know at the time when he wrote the book, how successful it would become. And one of the reasons is because people needed to find something to hold on to.
Yeah.
So what, SQuire, you don't mind if I say the Godwink for Godwinks was what for you? You were to write the book, to write
the Godwink of Godwinks was really the fascination I always had with what I thought were coincidences. I just, when I was running Good Morning America, I'd stand in the back of the control room and I'd wait for a reporter to say, ironically today, and I would say, well, maybe they're going to tell another one of those coincidence stories, And so But I also noticed later on that people didn't notice them as much as I did because I was looking for them. And I always found the coincidences in history. The fact that Adams and Jefferson, the two guys that had more to do with the signing of the Declaration of Independence than any other, the fact that they both died on the same day, exactly 50 years apart. And 50 years after the signing of the Declaration of Independence, and that day was July 4th.
And they died
That's
on the
when
same
they
day?
died. They died on the same day.
Mhm.
And so those kinds of things, makes you say, what are the odds of that?
Mhm.
And so that's when I started collecting Godwink stories. And we've been doing it ever since and developing the thesis. Actually, our readers have helped us develop the thesis as we've moved along this journey. But, it's now 20 some odd years later, and we've got 13 books,
Mhm.
4 Hallmark movies and 1 Netflix movie. And we're just starting.
Mm.
I love that. I love that. You both are amazing. The Dogwinks. So let's talk a little bit about Dogwinks, and we've got to talk about Rescue Ruby. Just incredible, because I remember when you both were on last, it wasn't out. If my recall is accurate, you were leaving shortly after the last interview we did for the filming of that.
Yes.
If my
Yes.
recall is accurate, but tell
No,
me
I think it was
about
because,
that.
because the book came out in May and we
May.
were leaving
Mhm.
in mid-May to go shoot in Canada.
Mhm.
But Louise, we engage in something that a lot of husbands and wives don't do,
Mhm.
and we encourage them to do. It is the most intimate act between a man and a woman. We engage in that act every single morning, and it's called partnered prayer.
Mhm.
Oh, I got you off the path there, didn't I? Partnered
no,
prayer. And we
please,
were
no.
engaged in
This is
partnered
the
prayer.
path. This is beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so Louise, and very often in that time when we're a threesome with God, that's when we get downloads of ideas and
Mhm.
so forth. And that morning, Louise had said,
Well, after our prayer time, I turned to SQuire and I said, I know this sounds so strange, but I said, I just have this strong feeling that we are supposed to do something with dogs. And that had never come into either one of our minds before. And
No.
as a matter of fact, SQuire looked like, what are we going to do with dogs? I said, I don't know, SQuire, but I just feel like that's what we're supposed to do. And it's such a strong feeling. And then SQuire started thinking about it. And he said, well, what if we did something we call it Dogwinks, but they're Godwinks, but dogs are in the center of the story. That's where the Godwink happens. And
Mhm.
we said, okay, that sounds good. And then we pitched it to our publisher and they bought it. But then we said, well, where are we going to find the stories? And the day after I said, well, SQuire, I feel like we're supposed to do something with dogs. And we said, where are we going to get the stories? I went on my Facebook page, and right there, the first thing I saw was someone said, hey, did you see this great Godwink story about an officer, Dan O'Neill, and this dog named Ruby, a shelter dog? Have you seen that? It's amazing, Godwink. So SQuire followed up, and then that is actually the first story in the book. And that was the one that Netflix wanted.
And that was the journey of Dogwinks. And now Dogwinks came out March 17th, and it is still 3 weeks later.
I mean, the movie.
The movie,
movie.
yeah, on Netflix. It is still in Netflix top 10 globally.
Mm-hmm.
We are in the top 10 globally, and
for hours watched.
And that's the main thing that they're concerned with.
I see.
How many hours do they watch? Well, a lot of movies, when you stop and think of it, a good number of movies, you see them and you don't want to see them again. A lot more movies, you only see them partially, and you say, maybe I'll go back and watch the rest of it. It just didn't capture me or whatever. But Ruby, we knew, and most Godwink movies, all the Godwink movies on Hallmark, by the way, are the most redundant. In other words, they have the most redundant viewing. They watch it over and over again. And we kind of figured that was going to happen with Ruby, and that's what happened. So our little pup, movie, Rescued by Ruby. It's like we're out there chasing a fire engine, running along and keeping up with the fire engine, the $150 million movie ahead of us, and we're a little under $10 million movie. And the reason that we're in the running is because people are watching it over and over again. Yeah.
And understandably, it is absolutely incredible. What's interesting for me personally is, having read the book, we talked about Rescued by Ruby last time, knowing the story, I got very emotional again watching the film. It's just so, I was talking with someone, and I said, Louis, don't do a spoiler. Just the other day, we were talking about it. I said, well, let me tell you the story, because I really want you to watch it. And watched it. He said, even though I knew the ending too, he said it's just incredible.
Yeah, the ending is amazing.
Because you realize it was true. It was a true
yes,
story.
a true story. Do you want to summarize?
Yeah.
Do you want to summarize it?
Well, yeah, the story is a young trooper who always wants to be in the police, in the Canine Corps. And he's always had to try harder than anybody else because he has hyperactivity and dyslexia. All his life, he had to do 10 times harder work to be on the football team, to be in the academy and everything else. And so, and that was a strike against him in trying to get into the academy. He just couldn't get in for 7 years. Time is running out. He's going to age out. And when he goes and sees the commander of the canine unit, who says, look at you, you're all over the place. Your foot's shaking, you can't focus. And he says, besides, we don't have a budget. The budget was cut. That's all absolutely true. And so Officer Dan was connected by divine alignment, Godwinks and everything else, with a dog. Now, what he didn't know was that dog had 2 hours to live. That dog named Ruby at a shelter, Australian Shepherd Border Collie mix, had been returned by and rejected by 5 families, unmanageable. And there was one lady who was advocating for this dog named Pat. And she said, you can't do this. You can't put down Ruby. And so she was the one who was the advocate for Ruby. And when Ruby and Dan were brought together through the divine alignment, and it was just, talk about 2 ADD characters, trying to make it. And they both had to try 10 times harder. But 6 months later, they rose to the top in the Canine Corps, and they were outperforming other hotsy-totsy dogs that they bought for $15,000, bred for this in the Czech Republic. And then you fast forward to a day in October when it was freezing, and they get a call, and a boy is lost in the woods, and Ruby takes off into the woods, and Officer Dan is chasing after her. Ruby finds the boy at the bottom of a ravine. The boy has just barely got a pulse. The GPS doesn't work. This is all true. Yeah. Ruby starts barking, and that leads the other EMT to that location. The boy is saved. He goes to the hospital. Trooper Dan goes to the parents to give them the good news. And as he's leaving the weeping parents, the mother says, have you ever heard of a dog named Ruby? And he said, that's the dog that's my partner. And she cried again. It was the woman who had advocated for Ruby to live in the shelter years before. And that is such an amazing Godwink. And so It is the movie is all filled with Godwinks, and those of us who love Godwinks, we just look for them now, and then you can see them. We don't put a tinkle bell on them like we do in the Hallmark movie. It's a little ding ding ding.
Little
When a
tinkle.
Godwink
We tinkle
happens.
every so
You
often.
know, we don't have Kathy Lee there saying, and a Godwink, blah, blah, blah. This is for the subtle crowd on Netflix.
You know what was interesting about it, Louis, though, and even Netflix, they felt it was a beautiful script. Karen Jansen, who wrote A Walk to Remember, and she wrote Dolphin's Tale, did the script. So it was a beauty, if it's not on the page, it's not on the stage, as they say. So she had done a great job, and she found the essence of each one of those beautiful characters. But I think that so many people could relate to the symbolism in it. Here's an underdog, who's he overachieves to get across the finish line, working together, the community that comes around him, a supportive wife, and all those things that we look at sometimes that maybe we discount. And policemen in general, we discount how the heroes that they are. And so when we decided what we wanted to do was we wanted to honor those heroes at the Rhode Island State Police. So we did a special screening before they aired, that they had the premiere on Netflix.
4 days before the premiere, yeah.
So everybody's there. They had a lot of press there and everything. And it was the first time we had seen the movie with an audience. And
on a big screen.
And so after the movie, I mean, they laughed in the right places, they cried in the right places, but after the movie ended, they stood up and they would not stop clapping. And we waited, we were about to go on stage. They would not stop clapping. They were so appreciative that we would show police officers in such a beautiful light. And it touched
wonderful.
our hearts tremendously. It really did. It was
Really.
it was a life-changing experience for us.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes,
That's it had to be. I mean, I get emotional, Louise. I see, for listeners, you're getting the both of you. I mean, it's so touching and so important.
Yes.
I hate to say these days, especially, but anytime to have that gratitude and more so now than ever.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That had to make you feel. I just, like I say, I get when SQuire, when you're describing the story, as much as I know it, I start getting chills and tearing up. I mean, you say that about the applause. That had to be just so incredible for you.
Yes.
Well, the beautiful thing too is that Ruby and Officer Dan are still working. They're partners. Ruby's 11, and Dan and Ruby are getting so much publicity. It's so funny, Louis, because when we had no budget for PR because Netflix, they have the big films, So we were the little pup
The
that
runt.
could, the runt. But what happened was when people started finding out about the story, because it went over the AP of the Associated Press, there were calls, and we had Grant Gustin, who's a wonderful actor, and Scott Wolf, terrific actors. But who they wanted to interview was the real Dan O'Neill, Officer Dan, and the real Ruby. And so Dan ended up becoming this star in his own right.
Yeah.
And thankfully, he was so articulate. I mean, we could not have picked a better spokesperson.
I
for
know,
it.
he's wonderful.
So they actually have been invited. They're being honored at the Red Sox game.
Oh, yes.
Officer Dan
That's
and Ruby.
wonderful.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so great. Yeah.
That's wonderful. I've got to ask you, what you say that now, with all these years, Godwinks has become part of the vernacular, our language. People say Godwinks because of what you've done. Now Dogwinks. That's just got to feel incredible for you. It's become part of our consciousness.
Yeah.
A Godwink.
Well, it is. It's fun, and it's it is just fun. But coming up with names is something that I always did. When I was at ABC in children's television, running that for almost 15 of the 20 years I was at ABC. And so I just was always focused on names, because my feeling was that when you put a title on something, that's your first marketing opportunity. I just rail at people who give names for movies that you can't understand, and you need a lower third crawl to explain what it is, you know. And so so Godwink was one of those words that when it came into mind, it just sounded like it was a fun word, a non-threatening word. And I had no idea 20 years ago when we first did a show together with you, Louie, I was really thinking of Godwink as being an alternate word to coincidence. But here is what I didn't realize. I didn't realize that coincidence, if you look it up in the dictionary, is two events coming together without apparent cause. That's what a coincidence is. And that fits the need of a scientist and other things along those. But when it does have a cause that you believe to be a divine cause, coincidence doesn't fit anymore. And so Godwink are two things coming together with the cause that is divine. And what is fascinating is that was a vacancy in the language I didn't know was there. And that little word Godwink just fit that vacancy. So the moment somebody heard the word, they could put it into their little bag of tricks and little bag of language and start using it, because it now fits something that they didn't even know the vacancy was there. And I've had a lot of pastors have recognized that. A lot of pastors have said, well, we knew what it was, but we never had a name for it. Something that God has done that is so unbelievable, it could only have been him.
And in the Jewish language, there's no word for coincidence because they believe everything happens for a reason. They have a word called beshert, which is, brings things together for a cause. Two couples. I knew you in the womb is basically what the beshert deeper meaning is. And so that kind of fits that. But that's in my beshert, my bringing together my wife, the love of my life, and so forth. And so that is a Godwink, but it's only a partial definition of a Godwink. And it's also such a joy for people to find the Godwinks once they realize there's a word for it. Then they start looking for them. They can't wait to tell us. Just yesterday, I have a friend, she was getting some physical therapy, and her physical therapy was talking about something, said, oh, it was a real Godwink. And she said, what did you say? And he said it was a real Godwink. She said, well, how did you know that word? Oh, I read it in a book. And she's, well, they're dear friends of mine. It's like people love. And then we saw yesterday, they were an aunt and a niece, and they both had on their license plates. Their license plates were Godwink, but GODWNX.
Yes.
Yes. So
we have the license plate GODWNK.
Yeah, we see those everywhere. So all around the country, they'll send us license plates and say Godwink on them. I know, it's just fun.
Again, it's become part, again, dogwinks.com, godwinks.com. Also, we've got the links up at louisfreeshow.com and WFMJ.com. I've got to say, and I remember, it just reminded me of something, SQuire. I remember a number of years ago when I had a guest in studio, was talking about a really difficult situation and referenced Godwinks. And it was a Godwink, and I started to explore, well, where'd you? And I'm like, again, I don't want this to sound like I know that guy. I was like, I know he's been wrong with me.
Well, you made me. You made me, Louie, that radio show years ago.
You owe him big time.
I owe you big time.
Can I? Couple of things, and I reached out, and you've always been so gracious with all the successes. I do want to say this over, again, with the net, everything, and you still do the gig with me, and you've always been so wonderful to communicate with, on and off air, SQuire. I'm serious. Touch it. Yeah. I don't want to. Again, I'm going to quote it, folks. Here it comes. My wife always says, my greatest asset is my greatest liability. There's no filter between my brain and my mouth. Sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes not so. But I've had guests on that, maybe their first book or whatever, and it becomes a bestseller or whatever. And can't reach them anymore, and that's okay. You know, they've got bigger, better things to do. SQuire, you've always been just so wonderful when I reach out to you with all the successes and the Netflix movie, and I'm grateful for that. You know, sorry, I am a very emotional guy. Very grateful for that. But again, with that, then it became part of, as she said it and talked about the book, because the book inspired her and to understand that better. And I reached out to you and you responded, and it was years ago, and you've always been that way. You stay, what do I want to say? Connected. I was going to say grounded, connected, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm, you know, my first job was behind a microphone at a radio station. And I still feel as though that's my native language is radio. You know, so no matter what we end up doing, those are just trinkets of the moment. I've always loved radio, and I just think that those of you who operate in this field, in this medium, and do it so well for so long, I mean, it is a very special gift.
And you know, the Godwink brand, it's like, I think it's humbling because we didn't make it up. We know who did that. You know, we always know that it's God who touches people.
Yeah.
You know, he's the Godwinks come from him. They don't come from us. So we know from where it comes from. And we don't ever want to forget that, because that's where we see where God's mighty hand in our life can just move our steps and then touch other people's lives in such profound ways that how can you not be grateful and humbled by such a great God?
Here is a bit of God trivia. I'm just making up here, but the fact of the matter is that we can't even Googling and everything else, we cannot find a regular series that has been on national television, whether it was a movie series, a television series, or whatever, on national television, maybe on some local TV cable shows and so forth, that had God's name at the top of the masthead. Okay. And I was saying that all along until about 3 years ago when CBS ran a series in prime time after 60 minutes, but it had God in the head, you know, God called me or something like that. And so, because they always kind of avoided it. It was touched by an angel. Heaven can wait, you know, all of those. It was just a kind of a little, it wasn't on the money. It was just kind of, and so the Hallmark Godwink movie series and a Godwink Christmas every single year as the name of the movie series on Hallmark Channel. That is the first series, certainly the first movie series, and right now the only one that is on American television anywhere. Yeah.
I want to say that, you know, and again, Louise, you were saying, you know where it comes from. We as humans have choices to make, and you chose to move forward with this. Again, I understand what you're saying, and you're saying it. This was, you know, from God. You chose to. How do I want to watch be the vehicle to bring it. Godwinks too.
Well, you know, you can sit by the side of the road and wait for your destiny to come to you, or you can get on the road and start walking, and God will start delivering these Godwinks along your path that direct your steps. You know, there's a wonderful scripture in the Bible that says, "In all your ways acknowledge me, and I will direct your paths." And he does do that.
Yeah.
And you two are amazing in the world. I love you both. I'm so grateful.
I love you, Louise.
Seriously, I am just so grateful. Obviously very grateful that you do the gig with me. That very, very grateful for the relationship, etc. But the impact that you two have made literally around the world to better our world is just incredible. You know, there's something tikkun, you know, the obligation to heal the world. And again, I hope that this doesn't offend anybody. My interpretation is you've got to heal the world. God says I want to be careful how I say it. Well, I can't heal the world. That doesn't absolve you of doing everything you can to try to heal the world. And you two have just done such an incredible job. I would urge people to get the books, read the books, go to the websites, see that Netflix film. It will impact you.
Rescued by Ruby. Can I tell you just one thing
Oh,
about that
please.
movie that warmed our hearts, because we are the hope people. A Godwink is a sign of hope. It always is. It's always a sign of hope. And so, but we've also felt that we're kind of, this works in America, and yeah, the book is in 30 different languages, but somehow or other we have never really felt connected to people in other countries the way we do in America. And so the Netflix experience was a whole new opportunity for us, because we could watch the computer algorithms and how they were pouring out who was watching and so on and so forth. And we were absolutely blown away that the first 2 weeks we were number 2 globally.
Yeah.
Globally. But here was the fascinating thing. We could go and see where we stood with 160 other countries.
Wow.
And in every single one of those countries, we were in the top 5. Maybe, or I should say the top 7. There was one that was number 7. But so what it was saying to us is that the whole world needs signs of hope.
That's right.
Oh, the whole world needs these kinds of stories. And we really are so much more alike than we are different.
That's right.
When we stop and think about it.
Yeah, I agree. And that's beautiful. And by the way, when you say in 30 languages, most people can't name 30 languages. So seriously, think about the impact, because when I think about that, people start, I say, make a list of how many different languages.
Yeah, that's an interesting
Well, think
thought.
about 30, I'm not going to quiz you, but think about, can you name, you probably, I'm sure you two can, but think about naming 30 languages. That's incredible. So are such beautiful, beautiful people. And I'm so grateful for you in our world.
Thank you.
Thanks, Louis.
God
Thanks for
bless
coming
you,
and doing the
Louis.
gig with
We
me.
can't
again.
wait to come back and see you.
You know, I'm going to be asking. Thank you.
Take care,
Louise,
Louise.
one more quick one. One more
Oh,
quick.
let's see.
Well, you talked about Cher. She is so like fabuloso. Woo!
Thank you both. How wonderful, folks. Again, Rescued by Ruby. You've got to see it. You've just got to see it. It is absolutely incredible, beautiful. And those